Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Irv Homer Show. We went blank over here, Ron, on the my monitor here. Okay? Continue talking?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Irv Homer Show. It is Friday, March the 20th, 2009, rather. And this is the Friday edition of the Irv Homer Show. It's going to be a little different tonight, ladies and gentlemen, because we've got some serious things to reveal to you tonight on the Irv Homer Show. Mainly, yes, I see we're back on again. And your comments will be welcome, but not until I inform you of this information that has been forwarded to me. And this is unclassified, law enforcement sensitive information. I had mentioned on the last program and on my regular program during the week at WBCB 1490 AM that the possibility could exist of martial law being declared in the United States, and people thought I was crazy and said, under the circumstance, it's not going to happen. But for those of you who know my past, I was very active in exposing the fraud of the Internal Revenue Service and of the action that the government has taken in the past, going back to the 1980s, into what was considered to be unconstitutional. And I still say that the United States government has acted unconstitutionally since the 16th Amendment was passed. However, a dear viewer sent me some information that I had forgot, that I had been aware of at the time it occurred, and what I will do tonight is to give you some information that may come as a shock to some of you, but it didn't come as a shock to me, because in the 80s I was aware of some of the organizations and groups that the United States government was monitoring very carefully as being anarchistic. You can follow the Irv Homer Show on Twitter at www.twitter.com/Irv Homer Show. Once again, that's Twitter at www.twitter.com/Irv Homer Show. And of course, my website is www.irvhomer.com. My email address is evilirv@irvhomer.com. And tonight's program is going to be informative. It may be boring to some of you, but for those of you who are concerned about the history of the Posse Comitatus movement in the past and some of the reactionaries of those who latched onto the Libertarian Party, and the Libertarian Party over the years that I've been involved has rejected these groups, but for some reason or other these terrorist groups have latched on to the Libertarian Party. Ron Paul, Harry Brown, and others of the Libertarian Party, including myself, have denounced these organizations because the interpretation of the Constitution that they used is a literal translation. And so my warnings to the people that listen to this program and listen to my daytime program probably were aware of it. Well, if you were not aware of it, I will fill you in tonight on what the United States government has been investigating over the years. Before we get to that part of the program, I am outraged over what I hear on radio and television today, and even in the halls of Congress. I became aware that a 21-year-old young man in Connecticut yesterday, carrying an AIG tote bag, was brutally beaten by a motorist driving by who probably lost money with AIG, stopped the car and beat him and took off. And so in Fairfield, Connecticut, on the reports tonight, on the regular news, the police and the FBI and Secret Service, the sheriff's offices in Fairfield, Connecticut, where most of the executives of AIG live, is under strict surveillance to prevent violence taking place in Fairfield, Connecticut. It was a little news blip, and investigating found out to be true. Now, threats have been made to the employees of AIG. Threats have been made to congressmen and senators as a result of this turbulence in the economy of this country. Tonight, if you watch the news with any in-depth clarity, France had a riot this week involving 1 million people, and France is identifying it as an economic riot. This can happen in America. And what I reveal to you tonight from the unclassified law enforcement sensitive documentation may corroborate what I am talking about. I am embarrassed as an American, and the whole world is laughing at us when we realize that the United States nuclear submarine and an American warship patrolling the Straits of Hormuz in the Middle East ran into each other. 15 naval personnel on board the submarine were superficially injured. Now, it may seem like a joke, but this is an embarrassment to our military. What happened? How it happened? Nobody knows. But 25,000 gallons of fuel is now floating in the Gulf of Hormuz. It is an embarrassment as an American when we depend on the skills of our naval personnel to protect us by patrolling the waters around the world, that they ran into one another. This is more serious, ladies and gentlemen, than the fact that President Barack Obama last night appeared on the Jay Leno show, had a slip of the tongue in which he said his bowling scores are so bad that he thought he was in the Special Olympics. And of course the folks jumping all over the bandwagon, saying that was an insensitive remark and that the president should apologize, which he did, to the national leader of the Handicapped Olympics Committee, trying to be a comedian, I suppose, or being in the throes of insensitive comments. There's a reason for it, and I'll get into that later. But that being the case, I think it is more embarrassing that a nuclear submarine, one of the latest that we have in our naval fleet, runs into a destroyer cruising the Gulf of Hormuz. There will be no apology, I'm sure, of the U.S. Naval Command to the United States people for embarrassing us when their job is to know what the hell they're doing. They run into each other. I think it's a disgrace and that some heads should roll. To the comments that are being made on radio and television and in the halls of Congress, we can anticipate that some crazy screwball someplace is going to lead an anarchistic move against the employees of AIG or anyone that may be carrying an AIG tote bag. We have the Rush Limbaughs, the Sean Hannitys, and the Mike Gallaghers practically asking for lynch mobs on the streets of America to attack the executives and those people who are receiving bonuses. And I consider it almost to be an incitement to riot. I don't know where the Federal Communications Commission is. I think that they're afraid because they're going to say, oh, the Obama administration is trying to impose censorship on free speech. However, inciting the people in America to a point where they are frustrated because they can't do anything about it is in fact inciting riots and inciting some type of anti-government anti-Congress, anti-AGA personnel to be killed, injured, or both. And it disturbs me as a broadcaster that this type of irresponsible broadcasting is going on at this particular time. I don't know where it's going to lead to. We had an insane Senator Charles Grassley in a radio interview who actually suggested that the executives of AIG should commit suicide as Japanese politicians do when they are disgraced. So we are on the verge, ladies and gentlemen, forgetting the March Madness nonsense and forgetting baseball, that we've got some people that I consider to be irresponsible on the air, and also listeners who could act irresponsibly. I say that to back up what I'm going to inform you of tonight, of things that the government has been involved in the past. This is not the first time in the history of this country where anarchistic movements such as Posse Comitatus or other right-wing fanatical organizations decided to take the law into their own hands under the guise of being legitimate tax protesters. And in the tax, I don't consider myself to be a tax protester. I consider myself to be on the air over the years, explaining to you, the American people, where the United States government has drifted from the concepts of what the Constitution says. We have a contractual agreement between the government of the United States and its people. That's the one thing that makes this country different than any other country. And I've asked this question many, many times of my colleagues in forums where I ask them, what's the difference between America and other countries? Well, no other country, ladies and gentlemen, on planet Earth has a contract with its people. And that contract, called the Constitution of the United States and the Declaration of Independence, is a contract between we the people and our government. Both sides have an equal responsibility to adhere to that contractual agreement. We as citizens have a contractual agreement that we will abide by the laws. The Constitution gives us the right to change them. If the laws are oppressive, we have the right to change them. The Constitution of the United States has been changed 4 times so far. Not frivolously. You must have a legitimate reason. When the people contact their elected representatives, the elected representatives introduce the amendments. The amendments are then passed. And the government has a responsibility and a contractual agreement to abide by that contract, to do what they're supposed to do. And that is to adequately represent us and to protect us from enemies, domestic and foreign. Unfortunately, the American people have drifted away from the Constitution and have violated the contract by committing crime, and the government has drifted away from the Constitution and doing things that the Constitution does not give them permission to do. But the big story, ladies and gentlemen, that generated more interest around the country is the proposal by the New Jersey Bureau of Cosmetology. Now, why would that be an issue? Have you ever heard anywhere in the 50 states where the Bureau of Cosmetology wants to introduce legislation? Well, they do. And the Bureau of Cosmetology, the state of New Jersey, wants to ban Brazilian bikini waxing. That's right. Now, they are going to have their final hearing on April the 15th, which is really April Fool's Day, because that's the day you have to file your income tax. Well, what is Brazilian bikini waxing? It is the waxing of women's private parts so that they can wear a bikini without any hair showing. And so one of my colleagues on radio, Mr. Rush Limbaugh, I did it today because if he can do it on 600 radio stations, I figured management of my radio station would be safe. Well, Mr. Limbaugh, in his infinite ability to incite the public, and I know, okay, bodybuilders get waxed too. I don't know if they get waxed in their general areas or not, but I know women do. Oh, they do. Okay, well, not being a bodybuilder, I wasn't aware of it. So the next time I go to the men's room, I will observe bodybuilders as they do their thing in the urinal to find out whether or not they've had their privates waxed. Thank you for reminding me. And so Mr. Limbaugh is outraged over the fact that the state of New Jersey should leave women's crotches alone. It is not the duty of the governor or the Bureau of Cosmetology in the state of New Jersey to get involved in women's crotches. There will be debates from now until April the 15th, I am sure. Why is the Bureau of Cosmetology introducing this legislation? Two women of thousands of women and men who have used, why it's called Brazilian bikini waxing, I don't know. Apparently, well, I guess the beach at Ipanema, most of the women down there do body waxing or Brazilian crotch waxing or whatever you want to call it. But that's going to be the big issue, ladies and gentlemen, on the news media. So ladies, do your thing, men, do your thing, and if the Bureau of Cosmetology says you can't do it, maybe the sign in Pennsylvania that is on my license tag will be applicable. You've got a friend in the state of New Jersey, and you'll do it to each other. So it should be an interesting summer, and I guess maybe the crotch police will be raiding those places that are doing crotch bikini waxing illegally. Every once in a while you must inject a little levity into the program, and so that is my interjection tonight. I'm Irv Homer. It is Friday, March the 20th, 2009. Our telephone number, if you care to participate, is 215-253-8877. We do not need any emails of pictures of your bikini waxing, please, or photographs are not welcome. Although, I could run a contest, I suppose, to give away 2 free dinners at the Valley Stream Restaurant here in Langhorne, Pennsylvania, for the lady who sends, or the man who sends the best picture to the Irv Homer email at evilerv@irvhomer.com, and our group of judges will professionally examine your crotch to find out whether or not your crotch has won. Now please, no heckling from the audience. This program is brought to you. We're broadcasting from irvhomer.com. My website, once again, www.irvhomer.com. Email address is evilerv@irvhomer.com. And RGH Computer Services, ladies and gentlemen, put this thing together. And for all your computer problems, your computer service, if needed, their telephone number is 215-322-8685, 215-322-8685. Our phone number here in the studio is 215-253-8877 for your comments. And your questions on the chat room will be honored. Getting back to my involvement many, many years ago with members of Posse Comitatus and members of the anti-tax movement. And of course, one of the problems that we, at the time, and I wasn't a member, but I was more or less, I suppose, a voice on WWDB about wanting constitutional taxes imposed on us Americans. I don't think that's anti-American. I think that's pro-American. And so the renegades, the leeches, the hustlers tried to latch on to not only the anti-tax movement, but to the Libertarian Party. And that was one of the problems that even today Ron Paul and Bob Barr have. United States law enforcement, the Federal Reserve, the FBI, and other government agencies that many white supremacist groups of militias opposed and terrorized in the past are listed here according to the state of Missouri, the modern militia movement. And now, if you will indulge me, I think it is incumbent upon me to read you, as I said, the unclassified law enforcement sensitive information that I was aware of at the time and will relate to you. It may be rather lengthy, but I think it will be interesting and informative that what happened in the past when 11 million people were unemployed in the United States between 1980 and 1996. 11 million Americans lost their jobs during this time period. Those of you who are old enough will remember. Those of you that were too young at the time, I suggest you listen and you may have learned something. The militia movement began in the 1980s, reached its peak in 1996. Several social, economic, and political factors contributed to the surge in militia participation in the 1990s. The primary motivator for the movement was the farm crisis of the 1980s, which caused the destruction of 750,000 small to medium-sized family farms. For those of you of my age or younger may remember that. Overall, 11 million Americans lost their jobs during this time period. Right now, I think we have about 6 million unemployed. Academics contend that female and minority empowerment in the 1970s and 60s caused a blow to white male sense of empowerment. This, combined with a sense of defeat from the Vietnam War, increased levels of immigration, unemployment, spawned the paramilitary culture. This caught on in the 1980s with injections such as the Tom Clancy novels, Soldier of Fortune magazine. Let me add that Soldier of Fortune magazine, of which I subscribed to in those days, you could actually be hired as a mercenary if you were unemployed and get paid up to $50,000 a year to be members of the armed militia. Where the money came from, I don't know. Movies such as Rambo glorified individual combat. This culture glorified white males, portrayed them as morally upright heroes who were mentally and physically tough. It was during this time frame that many individuals and organizations began to concoct conspiracy theories to explain their misfortunes. These theories varied, but almost always involved a globalist dictatorship as, quote, the New World Order, which conspired to exploit the working class citizens. United Nations troops were thought to be ready to be operating in the United States in support of the New World Order. Much of this rhetoric would become anti-Semitic, claiming that the Jews controlled the monetary system and media, and in turn the Zionist-occupied government known as ZOG, the militia of Montana, MOM, became a key organization in pushing right-wing rhetoric and informing individuals on how to form a militia. A series of incidents in the early 1990s caused a surge in this militia participation. In 1992, standoff between federal authorities and the Weaver family of Ruby Ridge, Idaho, which I have mentioned on my program any number of times, became a spark for the movement. On August the 14th, 1992, a 12-day standoff began that would result in the death of a federal agent and the son of Randy Weaver. The wife of Randy Weaver was standing in the doorway of their hut at Ruby Ridge, and a FBI agent killed his wife and baby. The following February, a 51-day siege would occur at the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, resulting in the death of 82 Davidians and 4 law enforcement agents. In November of 1993, the enacting of the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act of 1992 additionally fueled the militia movement. The movement reached its peak in 1996 with over 850 groups identified to be operating within the United States. The militia activity from 1995 to 1999. November the 9th of 95, Oklahoma constitutional militia members were arrested as they planned to bomb the Southern Poverty Law Center, bomb gay bars, and abortion clinics. December 18, 1995, a drum of ammunition, nitrate, and fuel oil found behind the IRS building in Reno, Nevada. The device failed to explode. An anti-government tax protester is later arrested for the incident. January the 18th, 1996, a member of the Aryan Republican Army is arrested in Ohio after a shootout with the FBI. The Aryan Republican Army was also associated with 22 bank robberies between 1994 and 1996. You didn't read about these in the paper, did you, ladies and gentlemen? January the 1st, 1996, 12 members of the Arizona militia group called the Viper Team were arrested on conspiracy, weapons, and explosive charges after they were caught doing surveillance on government buildings in Arizona. 7/27/96, a bomb was detonated at the Atlantic Olympic Park, killing one person and injuring 100. Eric Robert Rudolph was later arrested and is linked to other bombings at abortion clinics and gay bars. 10/11/96, 7 members of the Mountaineer Militia were arrested for plotting to blow up the FBI fingerprint records center in West Virginia. 7/4/97, members of a splinter group of the Third Continental Congress were arrested in the process of plotting attacks on military bases. The group thought that many military installations were training United Nations troops that were planning on attacking U.S. citizens. 3/18/98, members of the North American Militia were arrested on firearms charges. Prosecutors claimed that the group conspired to bomb federal buildings in Michigan, a television station, and interstate highway interchange. 12/5/99, members of the California-based San Joaquin Militia were charged with conspiracy to bomb critical infrastructure sites in hopes of provoking an insurrection. The leaders of the organization also pled guilty to plotting to kill federal judges. 12/8/99, the leader of a militia coalition known as the Southeastern States Alliance was charged with conspiracy to bomb energy facilities in order to cause power outages in Florida and Georgia. The militia movement began to decline after the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing and raids on the Montana, Freeman, and Republic of Texas in 96 and 97. Poor public opinion of the militia movement and increased attention from law enforcement caused many of the uncommitted members to leave the movement. But many of the hardcore militia members grew angry with the militia for not mobilizing in response to perceived government aggressions. Some of these fanatics would splinter into smaller underground groups adhering to the principles of leaderless resistance. Many militia groups began to rally members in the belief that the government would collapse due to the Y2K scare. Remember that, folks, when we changed from 1999 to 2000? This theory claimed that the government would collapse due to computers not being able to handle the transition from the 1900s to the 2000s. The militia's inaccurate assessment of the Y2K threat badly damaged its reputation. Additionally, thoughts that President George W. Bush was sympathetic to their situation and a wave of patriotism after 9/11 would further diminish the militia movement. During this time period, the militia had lost the attention of the mainstream media and public, but it continued to exist. The SPLC reports, that's the Southern Leadership Conference, reports that between the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995 and 2005, that roughly 60 right-wing extremist plots were uncovered. From 2000 to 2008, 3/9/2000, a former leader of the Texas militia was arrested for conspiracy to attack the Houston Federal Building. 3/1/01, a former colonel of the Kentucky militia peppered a deputy's car with semi-automatic weapons fired during a traffic stop. 2/8/02, 2 members of a group called Project 7 were arrested for plotting to kill judges and law enforcement officers in order to kick off the revolution. 9/3/02, a plot by the Idaho Mountain Boys militia to murder a federal judge and a police officer and then break a friend out of jail was uncovered. 7/7/03, a Michigan militia member killed a Michigan state trooper that attempted to serve him a warrant. 10/25/04, a farmhand in Tennessee, was arrested for attempting to obtain ingredients for sarin gas and C4 explosives in order to conduct anti-Semitic and government attacks. 6/27/09, 6 members of the Alabama Free Militia were arrested on weapons and explosive charges. An ATF agent would go on to testify that 5 of the men were planning an attack on Mexicans in a town near Birmingham, Alabama. 12/08, December of last year, National Guard and Reserve facilities received packages with anti-New World Order rhetoric. This would occur within a week of a hoax anthrax mailings to state governors' offices. You remember that, folks? Well, the reemergence of the movement, right-wing extremists and militia leaders continuously exploit current world events in order to increase participation in their movement. Due to the current economical and political situation, a lush environment for militia activity has been created. Unemployment rates are high, as well as cost of living expenses. Additionally, President-elect Barack Obama is seen as tight on gun control. Many extremists fear that he will enact firearms confiscations. White supremacists from within the militia movement have further become angered due to the election of the first African-American president. Many constitutionalists within the movement have claimed that President-elect Obama does not meet the residency requirements to hold the office of president, and therefore his election is unconstitutional. Newer versions of the New World Order conspiracy have been concocted in order to empower the movement. The New World Order is seen as using law enforcement, military, National Guard, federal agencies in order to carry out its elitist one-world government. Law enforcement, militia forces are believed to be utilized in order to confiscate firearms and place individuals into FEMA security functions to an active duty infantry brigade. The movement sees this brigade as the force that will take their firearms, and that the unit is in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. Now, if you want to, folks, you can look up the Posse Comitatus Act on your computers. There are also concerns that the banking and media infrastructure are also being controlled by the Jewish elite, that these leaders are all members of the New World Order. There's a great deal of anger towards the Federal Reserve System and all forms of tax collections. I hope this is not boring you, but I find it interesting as hell because I lived at that period of time. Just last night, this is off the record, listening to a program where a gentleman called in, and it's the Art Bell program. It's an overnight syndicated program. A gentleman called in and said he is a hunter. Him and his brother are avid gun owners and shooters, and it's now has difficult buying ammunition. And so they, over the years, make their own ammunition. And many people make their own ammunition. They mix the gunpowder themselves. They make their own shells. They retrieve the shells, put a firing arm in it, a trigger mechanism, and insert the bullets. And when I heard that, I said, whoa, boy, they're at it again. Well, let us continue, ladies and gentlemen. Newer versions of the New World Order is concocted to empower the movement. The New World Order is seen as using law enforcement. This scenario has received additional attention due to the U.S. Army NORTHCOM assigning homeland security functions to an active duty infantry brigade. The movement sees this brigade as the force that will take their firearms, and this unit is in violation of Posse Comitatus Act. The Ammunition Accountability Act has been up for legislation in most states. This legislation will require that an ID number be engraved on the round of all ammunition, and this ammunition could in turn be linked to a place of purchase and the purchaser. Some states have added a clause to the act making it a misdemeanor to possess unregistered ammunition. The bill did not pass in the latest state of Missouri. The anticipation of the economic collapse of the United States government. Many militia organizations feel that the United States government will fall due to economic or racial issues. They believe that during the chaotic fall of the government, moves will be made to install martial law, confiscate firearms, and imprison many citizens. This fear has recently been heightened by a report from a Russian economic analyst, Igor Panarin. Panarin predicted that the U.S. would collapse and fraction into 6 different regions controlled by foreign governments. Panarin goes on to say that as early as the autumn of 2010, the economic crisis will lead to a civil war in the United States. Possible constitutional conventions. Currently, 32 states have called for a constitutional convention, or known as CONCON, that will add amendments to the U.S. Constitution. The CONCON will be held if 2 more states request it. The convention is planned specifically for the reason of adding a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. The militia movement is concerned that if a CONCON is held, the First and Second Amendments will be altered or removed. Now, my comment is, ladies and gentlemen, this information, once again, is from the Unclassified Law Enforcement Archives. And if you're worried about freedom of speech or the Fairness Doctrine, or you're worried about your right to own a gun, I think this would be more important for the bloviators on radio and television to expand on whether or not 2 more states asking for a constitutional convention will make a constitutional convention become a reality, and the First and Second Amendment could be eliminated. The North American Union. Conspiracy theorists claim that this union would link Canada, the United States, and Mexico. The NAU would unify its monetary system and trade the dollar for the Amero. We had mentioned that before on the Irv Homer show. Associated with this theory is concern over a NAFTA superhighway that would fast-track trade between the 3 nations. There is additional concern that the NAU would open up the border, causing security risks, free movement for immigrants across our border. Statements made by President-elect Obama and his chief of staff have led extremists to fear the creation of a civilian defense force. This theory requires all citizens between the age of 18 and 25 to be forced to attend 3 months of mandatory training. And this is something that I spoke about many years ago, and everybody just laughed about it. It's called the radio frequency identification. There is fear that the government will enforce mass RFID human implantations. The process would make it possible for the government to continually know the location of all its citizens. There have been suggestions that these microchips will be placed in babies when they're born to prevent kidnapping, and you know that they do have identification for your children to have them tattooed. We do it with our animals. We can place microchips in our animals, and if the animal gets lost, you just plug in and they can find the animal for you. Members of the militia movement often subscribe to the ideology of other right-wing extremist movements, such as, and these are the names of the groups that I've had in my file for some 30 years, I suppose. Christian Identity. This is the name of one of the groups. Religious ideology popular in extreme right-wing circles. Adherents believe that whites of European descent can be traced back to the lost tribes of Israel. Many consider Jews to be the satanic offspring of Eve and the serpent, while non-whites are known as mud people, created before Adam and Eve. That's the Christian Identity movement. White nationalists. White supremacists, National Socialists, neo-Nazis, and skinheads, we've seen them all around, ladies and gentlemen, are drawn to the movement as its anti-government, Semitic, and anti-immigration rhetoric. Sovereign citizen is another group. Individuals that see themselves as sovereign citizens question the legitimacy of the federal government. They argue that the government has gotten away from the intent of the Constitution and is thus not valid. These groups are strong states' rights advocates, but see the county sheriff as the highest position of authority in the state. These groups and individuals are well known for failure to register vehicles, driving without valid licenses. Sovereign citizens have been known to issue their own license plates and driver's license and to issue summons to appear in common law courts. And I had mentioned to you before that I met Peggy Christensen personally many years ago. She has no driver's license, she has no owner's card, she has no insurance, and defies any law enforcement officer to arrest her anywhere in the country. And they just don't do it. One of the organizations is known as the Militant Abortion. Anti-abortionists have been known to take up arms in support of their beliefs. Eric Rudolph, who was responsible for the Atlanta Olympic Park bombing and abortion clinics, was a member of the anti-abortionist group. Tax resistors. This movement is strongly in opposition to the collection of federal income taxes. Individuals in this movement generally believe that income taxes are invalid and that tax laws do not apply to them. This was one of the groups, ladies and gentlemen, leached on to the movement that I was aware of while I was broadcasting on commercial radio. Anti-immigration is another group. Some militia organizations have been formed solely for the purpose of countering the threat of illegal immigration. Extremists will argue that immigrants are taking the jobs of U.S. citizens during times of high unemployment. Additionally, illegal immigrants are seen as sucking up government resources without paying taxes. Some militia units patrol the border in order to safeguard against drug smugglers, gangs, or violent immigrants. These groups, ladies and gentlemen, you've seen them on television getting the applaud and awards of people like Mike Gallagher, Rush Limbaugh, and Sean Hannity. Utilization of the MILSIM, which once again is the synonym for the group. Militia members have been attending military simulation events in order to increase their combat readiness. MILSIM is a realistic combat sport in which two forces, sometimes up to platoon strength, utilize paintball, airsoft, or miles gear to conduct realistic war games. You've seen them on television. The desire to increase the realism of the MILSIM has drawn members to seek and conduct military leadership, planning, communications, navigation, and tactical training. Militia and survival training events, regional training events, are being held with the intent of teaching individuals how to establish militia organizations. These events usually focus on individual soldier skills, land navigation, marksmanship, escape and evasion. Some events have been set up in order to prepare for joint operations between militia organizations around the country. Communications. The use of shortwave radios for communication and broadcast is common among most militia groups. These groups communicate through forums, Yahoo groups, blogs, social networking sites, websites, and online talk shows have been established to push rhetoric, usually a skewed version of current events. Let me repeat it. Websites and online talk shows have been established to push rhetoric, usually a skewed version of current events. There is one guy that is really far out. Recruitment. Militias are recruiting members and supporters through the following means: gun shows, online forums, websites, social networking sites, informal social networks. Additionally, militia recruitment may be done at events or meetings held by organizations that share ideologies with the militia but not necessarily prone to anarchy. These organizations hold training events that are open to the public and generally recruit publicly. These groups desire to aid the county sheriff or governor in emergencies such as a natural disaster. It is not uncommon for these groups to be seen in public doing community service-related work. Infiltration. Public groups are less likely to publicly push malicious rhetoric and have a traditional military-style chain of command and leadership structure. These groups have been known to form underground units to provide training and guidance to new forming organizations. These groups primarily adhere to the principles of Louis Beam's philosophy of leadership resistance, This philosophy advocates small, autonomous cells driven by ideology rather than by direction of leaders. These groups are difficult to gather intelligence on, and no one outside this cell would be aware of the organization or its plans. Individuals or lone wolves have also been known to adhere to the principles of leadership resistance in order to perform or plot acts of violence. Another organization is the Committee of Safety, an organization established to lobby government officials and confront corruption. These groups claim to be the voice of the people and usually control or associate with militia organizations in their region. These organizations are targeted at the county level, but are also forming state and national level organizations. Political paraphernalia. Militia members most commonly associate with third-party political groups. It is not uncommon for militia members to display constitutional party, campaign for liberty, or libertarian material. These members are usually supporters of former presidential candidate Ron Paul, Chuck Baldwin, and Bob Barr. Now, for those of you that do not know, I know Ron Paul. He is also a physician, and he's a congressman. But Bob Barr was one of the men who was most active in impeaching Bill Clinton, who switched and became a libertarian. Anti-government propaganda. Militia members commonly display picture, cartoons, bumper stickers that contain anti-government rhetoric. Most of this material will depict FRS, IRS, FBI, ATF, CIA, UN, law enforcement, and the New World Order in a derogatory manner. Additionally, racial, anti-immigration, anti-abortion material may be displayed by militia members. And they do have their own flags, which I have here in my possession. That basically, ladies and gentlemen, is the information from the Missouri Information Analysis Center, Division of Drug and Crime Control in the state of Missouri, unclassified law enforcement sensitive issues. And they have a list of all the books that are available. And this is information that I have been aware of over the years. The groups and organizations that I mentioned tonight, folks, are just some of the ones that I have in that briefcase that the FBI and the CIA and organizations have been investigating for years. When I made a statement, I had mentioned to you on one of my previous programs, when I spoke before a chief of police banquet, and I said, although you don't read about it in the paper, you don't have to worry about Al-Qaeda forming cells in America. There are right-wing nationalist organizations that have cells in America that do more damage that is not reported than Al-Qaeda. Now, as a result of what I read to you tonight, and the anti-government, anti-AIG rhetoric that is being put out on radio, television, talk shows, legitimate talk shows, the inciting of the public could cause the United States government to impose martial law. Right now, you don't think it's possible. But you have to remember, we have 4.5 million as of, I believe, today's Friday, I believe on Tuesday, latest unemployment record, we have about 4.5 million unemployed people. What happens, ladies and gentlemen, if this economy isn't turned around? We end up with 11 million unemployed people. That was the beginning of the Posse Comitatus movement in America and the pro-militia movement in this country. The question is, how far can these people incite anarchy and riot on their radio programs? I hope I didn't bore you with this, but I think it's important that you be aware of the fact that if you're an investment broker, if you're a banker, if you handle anybody else's money and they lose it, if this anarchistic rhetoric on radio and television continues, your life is going to be at risk. Once again, I'm only telling you what's happening. The rest is up to you. I wouldn't visit Fairfield, Connecticut right now if my life depended on it. This is a city, ladies and gentlemen, that is under practically martial law, with the exception of sending in the National Guard there to protect the employees of AIG. Their children have been threatened, letters, emails, all type of communication is being monitored. So I don't know. I can only tell you that it's happened before in this country, and the possibility is going to happen again. You may not be aware that these groups have been around. I've been aware of it for years. I also am aware of the fact that right now, and when this thing hit me, and I do thank the person who sent me this information, which made me go back into my files. Chris, I thank you for sending me this update, but this is only part of Posse Comitatus and the state militias that I'm aware of. And unfortunately, many of them have a Christian name, the Christian warriors, the Christian benefactors, the Christian saviors. And if you're a Christian, I would certainly not want to be associated with these groups. There was something else I wanted to tell you. Have I been under surveillance in my life? Yes. I won't relate some of the things that I went through, but one of these days I may tell you. Let's go to the chat room and see what is on the board. Once again, the telephone number here is 215-253-8877. 215-253-8877. I doubt whether you're going to hear this information around the dials, because the people on the radio are the ones that I feel are inciting riots and anarchy. Irv, doesn't the Second Amendment imply that a militia is necessary to ensure freedom of the state? Yes, it does. That's exactly why 32 states are asking for a constitutional convention. Maybe you didn't hear me. But 32 states are asking for a constitutional convention which would eliminate the First and Second Amendment, which would eliminate the right to bear arms, free speech, and the right to form a militia. The Second Amendment. Read it. Irv, do you think this talk of a second civil war is possible? Yes. Because the frustration level of people today that are being inundated by the news, so many houses are being foreclosed. You see the sob stories of people, and I don't mean to be insensitive, but you see people losing their homes and for sale signs, and this house in Arizona and this area in Florida, and people abandoning properties and leaving condominiums that they thought they were going to make money on. Certainly I believe it's possible. Irv, aren't these our fringe wacko groups? My dear friend, I don't take anybody as being a wacko who has the ability to kill me. Now, you may think they're wacko groups. However, wackos were in Germany that followed Adolf Hitler. Wackos were Russians who followed Joseph Stalin. Wackos are following the head of North Korea. Wackos are following the head of Iran. Wackos frighten me. I don't know about you, but I don't want a wacko to have a gun, material to make a bomb, material to form a militia, to meet and have paintball mini wars in the woods in Fairmount Park. You're not old enough to remember, but many movies were made about Adolf Hitler. that he was a crazy guy with a little mustache. Hey. Jack Oakey played Benito Mussolini. I forget who played Adolf Hitler, but we made fun of him. There were songs. When the Führer sings, "He is the master race," we go right in the Führer's face. We were laughing at Adolf Hitler. He was a wacko. Sure killed a lot of Americans, though, didn't he? Irv, many Christians believe that RIFD chips is a symbol of the sign of Satan from the Revelation book of the Bible. No question about it. It is the mark of the beast. Learned scholars, both Hebrew and Christian, have studied for years to identify what the mark of the beast is. Is it 666? Is it stamping P on the forehead of a prostitute? And so you can lead people, and that was one of the reasons I think that Marx said that religion is the opiate of the people. And it is the opiate of the people. The opiate of the people can be used for positive reasons or negative reasons. So you must listen to the wackos. Irv, are the Minutemen on the border considered militia? And is there a place for a militia in this country? And will we have this country without a militia? And isn't Obama the ultimate community organizer? Well, there's a lot of questions there. Obama is the President of the United States. Obama worked as a community organizer. He was involved with Acorn, involved with people who were community organizers. Nothing wrong with being community organizers. They're all over the place. I don't want to mention names of these fraternal or social organizations. Nothing wrong with being a community organizer. But when you are an organizer, a community organizer, to overthrow the government, you better have a damn good reason. You better have a damn good following. Is there a place for a militia in this country? I suppose so. But we have a thing called a ballot box in America. We don't have mandatory election. We, the boobus, stupid asses in America, have selected the people in Washington that created this mess. Now, don't go blaming them, because they wouldn't be there if the asses of America didn't elect them to be there, or continually re-elect them to stay there. Our next question on the chat room, there are rooms there. How much does the group that wrote that report get from the state? Wow, seems like they have way too much time to think and write reports. This report was written by the Missouri law enforcement agencies. They weren't a group. You can get it on your email. You can get it on your state. This is the Missouri Information Analysis Center, signed by the governor, Jeremiah Nixon, John M. Britt, Colonel Heathley, and Van Gotsey. It is from the governor's office. Now, do you think they have too much time to think and write reports? Call the governor of Missouri. It's his report. Our next question on the website, or on the chat room. Couldn't Obama institute rules to shut down Limbaugh and Hannity, who are inciting riots? The president can do anything he wants to. It is not the responsibility of the president to shut down anybody. It is the responsibility of the Licensing Bureau of the Federal Communications Commission to make a determination or not whether these people are aiding and abetting anarchy, or providing equal opportunity on the radio stations to present a different point of view. Not somebody that calls in for 1 or 2 minutes and then gets hung up on. I don't want to see anybody lose their job in radio. I don't think Obama wants to either. But I think radio stations should be required on the same station to have equal time to rebut Limbaugh, Hannity, and everybody else. And if there is a liberal outlet, then there should be equal time for the conservative voice, too. But if the First and Second Amendment, as I've read, which you probably didn't hear, if this Constitutional Convention becomes a reality because the congressmen and the senators live in fear of their lives, because the frustration level in America may get to a point where the people can't handle it and they'll take to the streets. And don't think it can't happen. We've had people take to the streets and burn cities down. You forget the riots in Philadelphia, you forget the riots in New York, forget the riots in Trenton, you forget the riots when they burned Watts in California down. What the hell is wrong with you people? Can't happen here. Well, maybe it didn't happen in your neighborhood, but it did happen. The ignorance of the American people as to what has happened in this country is frightening to me. And I just try my best to inform you. The rest is up to you. I'm Irv Homer. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.